That was a good game.
Yeah.
I mean, we played it sort of straight through. So I think if you're playing it more casual like, it would have lasted more time.
And I probably would have noticed where all the stories were. So, because you had contains representations of psychosis.
If so my few criticisms are I think even if you played it slower, less casual, you still probably would have finished it in I don't know how it could take you more than 15 hours. And
Yeah,
it was a
their
$30 game.
their
I think I would have
estimates
liked to see
were,
it be $20 because of the number of hours in it, but it was a very
but
heavy
it
story.
was also absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, it was very
I
very
mean,
heavily story driven, and I think sometimes with the games where their entire intent is to tell a story and it's much less a game than a story, I think sometimes you can, like if you were to pay to watch a movie, you'd be paying $20 for 2 hours, as
yeah,
opposed to this where you're paying $30 for 15 hours. Um, but that's just like a minor criticism is if I was comparing it to another game that was a
I
game,
that
I
would
would
that wouldn't be
expect
a criticism
I
to
would
me.
expect 20 it that wouldn't be I'm listing my criticism.
I don't know.
Um, and the other criticism I think is, and again, it was a beautiful game. It was done very well. There aren't that many game mechanics.
Yeah,
Look at
it's
it
very
overall,
simple.
they do the same, they have the same handful of tricks. They just pull them out over and over and
Find
over
a rune,
again
open the door.
until the story is done. And I think I would have liked to see some more game mechanics in, because yeah, at some point you're just like, these are the same guys I fought on my very first,
Yeah.
I stepped off the boat and I fought a
Now
guy with a
more of
sword,
them.
and now there's just more of them. And then every boss fight was essentially there's a little variety in the bosses. I don't want to say that they were the same. The bosses themselves use different mechanics. Like the
No,
first
there were
time
only
you,
four bosses.
well, there was the first time you came across the red-headed axe guy. He was a boss.
Yeah.
First time you ever saw him, he was a boss. The first time you saw the guy with two sickles, the guy with two hand axes and skulls on his back.
Was he a boss? I don't
Essentially,
think.
the first
I
time you
feel like
saw every normal unit, you fought them one on one
it's
like a
true.
boss fight until you learned how to fight them, and then
Yeah.
that's a pretty standard trope in games to have boss fights of things you later fight normally. Um, so there were kind of more than three. They're mini bosses. They had more boss fights, but and there was some variety there. The charging guy was the only guy who charged, and the shield guy was the only guy that had a shield. So the bosses themselves, what they did differed, but the way you defeated them was always exactly the same, and your kit never changed. I mean, in your playthrough, your kit changed when you realized you could dodge halfway through the game, and you
Game
realized that
changer.
heavy attacks did different things than light attacks in certain situations, and that you could use a focus to get up off the ground, and you know. But in theory, those things were all around since the beginning. And if
Right.
they explained
There's no
those mechanics
tutorial in
to
this game.
you,
Yeah, it
then
would have
it would
been
have been the
much
same all
different.
the way through. Yeah. And the puzzles, there's only a handful of puzzles. I don't think they did the perspective puzzle right off the bat where you're not looking for a symbol, you're just looking to complete a picture.
Yeah.
Those start about halfway through, right?
Those started on the second god, the Raven God, where we
Yeah.
had to get the symbols lined up. So you fight Cert and then
I guess I feel like
Valraven?
lining up the symbols is not the same as lining up making
Right.
making a real life bridge out of
But I
illusionary
don't I
images of them.
can't recall if there was a bridge. I feel like the first bridge
Not doesn't necessarily have to be a bridge. There's like a
was
door
during
and
a shard. Right, but
but
what I'm saying is that those were the
lining
very
up the
first ones I saw of that, I think, were the shards when we were trying to get the sword.
pretty late, yeah. Pretty late in the game. Um that was nice that that changed, but again, I think a couple more game mechanics overall throughout the arc and then have a little more differentiation towards the end of the storyline. So it doesn't just feel like you mastered all of the game mechanics, and then there's just a lot more story to do. And
Yeah.
I think that was just I don't know if that weighed on you at all as the one playing it, but I at some points I'm just like, but there's there's no more game to play, but there's more story to tell. And again, I get when you're making a game to tell a story, the focus has to be on the story. But it wouldn't have hurt, and it wouldn't have been hard to throw a couple
I
more
don't know,
game
it didn't
mechanics in
bother me. I thought it was really interactive, like near the end when you're trying to go through those dark corridors and you know that Fenrir, the the dog looking boss, was following you in the darkness, so you couldn't be in the darkness too long. It had very little to do with the puzzles, more than like, oh shit, need a torch, need a torch. Like feeling that anxiety of
there. Yeah, they
trying to
had
get out of the
they were
darkness.
very good scenes.
So to me, it wasn't like, oh man, I really wish there was more fighting or like different kind of fighting or different kind of gameplay. More like I'm just immersed in this anxiety.
You know what I just thought was a little weird just now? Remember the puzzle where you're running through a maze and you're being chased by a
Yeah,
fire beast?
yeah, that was not
That
fun.
that was not fun. I
Like,
thought that was a good, very good puzzle.
yeah, but it, another at the same time. So I wasn't expecting it the first time, and so like after the first time, I'm just like anxiety ridden, like gotta get all the pieces and still have to run from this
Yeah, I like
monster.
that
So
variation in the same, find the symbol puzzles which they get, and they sort of progress. I like how they get more difficult and challenging with different sort of challenge. That was a good use of game mechanics. But my point on that is, at that point in the game, there you already destroyed the god of fire, so why was a fire beast the one that was chasing you through the maze? It would have made more sense if that
so
puzzle was earlier before you defeated
I
the
think
fire
that had to
beast.
do so every section of the game, the story that uh Graph Graph was telling had to do with the game. So in that section, that's where the plague was, I believe, and they're talking about the full moon inside a house, and if a full moon comes into your house, death will be upon the people in that house. And so I don't think the fire creature actually had to be the fire god. I believe it was a representation of that full moon.
Why would fire be a representation of a full? No, see, all the symbols in that maze was full moon shining into the maze, so that they weren't obviously representing the full moon.
It was representing the death,
Yeah, and
I
the
feel
death was
like.
probably the fire guy, which you had already beat.
I
So it's possible that they planned to have that earlier in the game, and then because of the game mechanic progression, they decided that that'd be too soon. They haven't done enough of those door puzzles.
hmm.
They need to push it back, or it's possible that they just moved it for. There could be any number of reasons why they may have pushed it
Right.
back, but it's possible that's what happened.
It could
That
also
it
be
was
related to
originally meant to be.
mythology that we're not completely aware of.
And they could have easily
So,
just chosen something other than a
fire.
fire beast. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean they would have been overdoing it if they went dark again. Um, but they could have. Was that during the segment where you were still fighting the illusionary god?
No. No,
You,
no,
you
no.
had already beaten the
So we've
illusionary
already
god?
we that was already we beat Cert and we beat Valraven. Uh we went to Odin's sword and then we were trying to complete the shards of the
Oh, that's
sword, so
right.
we
It was
went to those four
shards.
shards. And
Well,
so we were trying to go
since
through
those
the
shards
plague.
were sort of a different reality,
Yeah.
then maybe it would make sense it was a fire beast because theoretically those
Was
shards were
in the
from the
past.
past.
Yeah.
So the challenge could have been while the fire god still existed.
Right.
So having a representation of the fire
I
god, maybe that makes
personally
sense.
loved how they took the Norse mythology and connected it still to um the story.
I like Norse mythology. I like North and Norse and Greco-Roman mythology. Basically anything.
But I feel like that's most of like North Americans generally know Greco-Roman slash North mythology. That's what we're kind of raised
Some
in high
of
school. You never hear about like Asian mythology.
Indian mythology. Basically I think I like any mythology with lots of gods. I think that makes it really interesting. And I don't know about the stories so much of the Indian. Um,
I don't know much about Indian mythology, but I mean, obviously,
The I know that the gods are very they have a lot of personality and
right,
they have a lot of create.
quirks and whatnot
I
going
don't
on.
want to insult anybody when I say this, but the people that made those gods up used a lot of creativity making them. I think it's so it makes for good stories. I'm assuming they're good stories because
Well, they're
of
all very.
the character and the creativity that went into.
I feel like a lot of mythologies around the world kind of they follow similar stories. So like Japanese mythology to me and Chinese mythology I obviously are like my favorites. But like the creation stories of like Japan are somewhat similar to me at least to the creation stories of Norse mythology in some ways. It
I
just
feel like most all religions make an attempt to explain things
right.
with creation stories and like
It's always like
why is there thunder. They
taking
always they always try to explain those things, but I personally feel like I don't know how we got on this topic. Playing a game, but okay. So I feel like they're still quite different.
yeah, they're definitely different.
The storytelling, the perspective, even though that they do try to still cover those same topics, and some of them like the coincidentally the way they cover the topics end up being fairly similar. And then you come to some of the newer religions where the newer religions borrow from the older religions because that's how they sort of gained acceptance.
Shh.
But I do think that very, if you take into account, for example, Native American mythology, the world is on the back of a turtle. And that's very different from Greco-Roman mythology, where the world is still a sphere on the back of a big human.
Yeah.
They're still, explaining it in terms that a human would understand, like they re-microcosm it so it's a turtle but really, really large, or it's a human but really, really large, instead of it's just something else that we don't know. But the turtle is very different from a globe which is not a living thing on the back of a human. The Greco-Romans were very humanistic in the way that they thought about
Well,
everything.
yeah.
There's a lot of human
I'm
intrigue
not
and
saying that they're the same. I'm just saying like they all kind of have like you said, they're all kind of trying to explain the world. And so they have like where does the rain come from? Where does thunder and lightning come from? How did the earth come? How did people come? And
but I really like that you get completely different stories.
yeah,
Um, and I think that's why it really you could certainly like one the stories of one religion more than or mythology more than another countries because they go about storytelling differently. They think about the world differently, and they have like a different mental
yeah,
context when they
where
talk
like
about gods.
Norse mythology is very heavy on the like the fighting. There's a lot of trade, and I mean Norsemen were traders. That's what they were generally. But I mean we all or very much consider them like Vikings and they're violent and whatnot. And they weren't like the most violent people ever, but we see them that way, and they have this idea of the afterworld is for warriors. Valhalla is like the grand hall for warriors. Where in like China, Chinese mythology is like when you die, you go into an underworld, and it's very much like a government bureaucracy. And I just find that absolutely hilarious. It's like we have a bureaucracy on Earth, the underworld has a bureaucracy, and then heaven is just one giant bureaucracy of gods, too. It's just like, it's just so funny to see like the inefficiency of it. So, like, two very different cultures coming up with two very different like Valhalla, the underworld is for warriors, and then the underworld is for like accountants and whatnot.
Anyways, so yeah,
Fun game.
that was a really engaging game. Again, the gameplay I feel wore a little thin towards the end, but the story did not. Um,
It's definitely one of those games that I'll replay at some point.
I think this game, I think this game definitely deserves one full replay. I think
Just to do it slowly now that I'm
if
not
you
like super anxious, I kind of know what's going to happen, so I
slowly, I
can
was gonna say you could do it much faster now that you know
Well, no,
how the
slower
puzzles
in the
go. You
sense
won't
as I
get stuck
want to
on
focus
things.
more on the story. So when I was playing the game, I wasn't focusing as much on the story. And so, like, a lot of times I'm hearing the word darkness and I'm just like, I'm not getting it. Like, there are some games that try to be so in depth and so convoluted that the story is lost. I don't think this is one of those games, but I want to play through it again to catch the entire story.
Yeah, I think if you play through it with a controller,
Yeah,
knowing how to do the fighting and not
yeah,
getting stuck on any of the puzzles will make it a really smooth playthrough, and then you'll get more of the story and less of
yeah,
fighting the same boss 10 times because the auto difficulty was just off.
yeah. uh, That was weird.
I honestly, uh, normally I'm of the opinion that I like a challenge when I play a game. I like it to be
It
challenging.
depends on the
If
game
it's
for me.
not if I don't feel like it's I don't want to be banging my head against the wall. I'm not like that. I don't, I'm not like a speed runner level of challenge where I'm willing to do the exact same thing
Over and over
over
and
and over
over,
and over
like
and over. Yeah.
Fenrir, where it's
But
just like, okay,
I
I
want it
understand the
I
mechanics.
want it to be
I'm done.
challenging where I don't necessarily win every time I try. Um, but for this game, I think it behooves the developers to keep it on easy mode again because they're trying to tell a story, not get you stuck on some game mechanic where you're like, I already mastered this boss and the fight hasn't ended.
Yeah.
I think um, other games sort of along the lines of a Mario Brothers games and the Nintendo series. I think the Nintendo series has that sort of down pat. They understand like the 3-5-7 rule where it's like you do something 3 times or 5 times, depending on what the thing is. You only do something that many times, and then they understand that you have finished your learning curve, so you are now disinterested in doing that anymore.
Right.
There's no more to gain from doing it extra times. And I think you were really bumping up against that wall on that dog fight where it was just you were
I know
dominating
what's
that
going
dog
on.
forever and ever and ever. You just on and on and on into the night. You were trouncing him, and the battle just wouldn't end for you.
Yeah. I do like, there are some games, I think there's a Zelda game. I don't know if all Zelda games do this, where like when you try to do something, if you just continuously fail, they're just like, would you like some help? And it's like, yes.
There are a number of games that are really good about when people get stuck on things. One mechanic is as you do worse, the game gets easier, which I think is what they were attempting to do with
With the
the
auto.
auto. It
Yeah.
wasn't working, but I think that was what their
They're
intention
like,
was.
yeah, you're really, really good at this. We're just going to keep upping the HP. And I'm like, but I'm done.
I don't even know if, yeah, I'm not sure what was going on there. It was weird.
There's been
But
a
I
few
do want to
bugs in
say
the game.
they have they're like sitting on a gold mine as far as that mechanic where um when you get stuck, it has to you have voices in your head and the voices in your head already help you. So
Yeah.
if you get run over by that charging axe guy 10 times in a row,
There's just
like
like, evade, dipshit.
after the third time, I think they did
They
say
were they were
they were
yelling
saying
evade, and I'm
evade,
just
but
like, I don't know how
if
to
you
evade
yeah,
yet.
if you don't know how to evade, and maybe it would be
So
taking
it
you out of the
was
game if
my
they're like
fault.
hit the X key, right? That'd be a little out of the
Yeah,
game,
they
but
never did that.
um they have a perfect opportunity with the voices in your head to give you direction when you're lost in direction,
Yeah,
which um I wonder how long this game was in production for.
I don't know.
Because like we've both noted, neither of us knew about this game. That might just be because we haven't been up on games that we should be, but it kind of came. I mean, I also want to point out. Okay, so oftentimes when we find out about games, it's when the game is in alpha or beta or something like that, and this is the kind of game that you put in alpha.
Right.
Again, it's a short story essentially. If you see part of the story,
You
you've
know the
ruined
rest.
the
Yeah.
game. It would be like putting a movie in a movie theater in beta. Like you can watch this movie as many times as you want, and we're gonna release it in theaters next year. Nobody's gonna come to it after they see it in
Well,
beta.
some people, I don't understand when people like go to see a movie like 3 times in a movie theater.
In fact, I think I've been to some movies multiple times in theaters, but normally when that happens for me, it's because
You're with different
I went
people.
to see it by myself the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
time, the night it came
See,
out, and then the next weekend I go and see it with my family, and then a
yeah.
group of friends
That's the
haven't
only
seen it
time
yet.
I understand it. It's like, okay, I'll see it again
But
with you
it's
guys.
not
But
when
like,
it happens for me like that. It's not like, I see it again. It's like that was a good movie. I'm willing to watch that again.
yeah,
Because if I'm like, I don't know about this movie. I already watched it. I really need to see it again. I'll actually say no. I don't want to go to that movie. With my friends and be like, I already saw that. You guys go have fun. I'll something else.
there's very few movies that have done that for me. But
If it's a really good movie, I'll watch it. Like Deadpool. You watched Deadpool a number of times.
yeah, that's
That was a
true.
good movie. You were
That's
willing to
true.
watch it
And
a
I was
number of,
willing to watch it, and I
and
probably would
then
still be watching it again.
if you wait long enough so you start forgetting things from it, then you get to it's
See it
new to
again.
you kind of watching it.
That's when I watched it on HBO.
Yeah.
It's like Shaun of the Dead. I could watch that movie so many times over. I love that movie.
And there are a bunch of games on my Steam account that I've played through and I want to go back. I mean right now, the other games we're streaming are games we've both played to completion before. So yeah, there's some playability if you um
All right,
yeah, I don't know when it get a chance.
will do, and
And when you do
hopefully
it,
it'll look
play
better.
play through the whole thing on easy. And when people join your chat and uh, poke fun at the fact that you're playing on easy, completely ignore them because they are in the
Just
wrong on this game. Normally I'm like, yes, you should be playing on hard difficulty. Hard difficulty is the way to go. This is not, at least in my
see,
opinion, this is
I
not the way
like
to do this
playing
one.
casually. I like playing middle. I don't want to play it easy unless I get super stuck. And I generally don't play too many games on difficult because I'm usually playing it for the story. So it depends on the game though. So like there are some games that I would probably play on difficult mode only because I'm like, I played it in normal mode, mastered it, let's do difficult.
I like starting in hard. I like starting in the hardest mode. I think sometimes the really, really hard modes in games, um, they're so difficult that it prevents you from properly learning the game. And when that's the case, then you're on too hard of a difficulty.
Yeah.
But so I try to choose the hardest difficulty that won't prevent my learning the game. And then if it ends up too hard, I can just drop it down. Most games allow you to change the difficulty level while you're playing them. So I start out high and decrease until I get to the proper difficulty level, like the challenge I started out with. Um, the hard mode for Zelda, Breath of the Wild. I would be all about that, but uh, you have to have if you're streaming it, you have to have viewers that are willing to watch somebody struggle at something. And I know
Unless
that is
somebody is
something.
like complete pro at it.
There's a whole community of people that
Yeah.
like watching speed runs, and if you ever watch a speed run stream, you're just watching somebody fail
Fail over
over and
and
over and
over
over
again.
again.
Yeah.
So people are willing to do that. It's just you have to figure out whether you want that to be your stream or not.
I would see. I don't like frustration level. I play games for the joy of it. I don't like getting
Some people
frustrated,
don't
and
get frustrated when they
I
fail.
know, but I know I am somebody who will get frustrated. I'm like, I'm done. So
I tried to kill that guy two
knowing,
times, no more.
no, 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 that is not. It's more like I've tried this 50 times.
Well, in
I'm done.
in this game, you fought those boss battles a lot of times in a row. You get pats on the back for how many times in a row you fought some of those boss
Because
battles.
I know I was
But
doing it right.
in Zelda hard mode, you fought Babakin like twice, and then you're like, "F this."
No, it's when I saw the Lionel and I didn't have any armor.
Well, you can ignore you didn't have to kill a Lionel.
And the only weapons I had were twigs, and they were like insta breaking because apparently the sturdiness of all weapons is down in that game.
Yeah. When I
And they heal
when I
instantly.
saw you running around in hard mode the first time on Breath of the Wild, in my head I'm like, dun 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 dun. Dun. Like in my head, it's like it's on, and you gotta like sneak around and plan your attacks.
Yeah. I feel like
That's hard mode in my head. It's like
if so
I get
I didn't think it
the
was gonna be that hard because
007. Ba-da-da, ba-da-da,
I've
ba-da-da.
played the Zelda Ocarina of Time Master Mode, and there is like very little difference between the original and mastered. I get it. I get it. Stop it. But like, so there's a couple more monsters. Nothing is like leveled up to a different level of monster. And like almost all the dungeon or some of the dungeons have been like flipped, and that was about it. So I'm just like, oh sure, Master Mode in Breath of the Wild. Wasn't expecting everything to be leveled up at least one, and your weapon durability to be down to like 2 hits and it's done.
Did they change weapon durability?
I think they might have. I'm
I
not
don't
quite
think
sure.
they did.
Maybe it was just I was hitting harder
I mean,
bosses with sticks.
Yeah, sticks
So,
just don't have any durability to them.
but still. So
That
yeah,
would be really silly if they changed
I don't know.
durability drastically, because weapon durability was already one of the main complaints.
Zelda Breath of the Wild Master Mode. Let's see what they did.
Well,
I don't want
your
the
stream
Master
can't see
Sword.
you. Okay.
know.
So
Anyway.
that was a good stream. I think we should end the stream now while you
Bye everyone.
browse Zelda stuff.
Have a wonderful night
Bye,
or
everybody.
day.